My wife didn't just betray me, she planned to erase me completely. She wanted my children, my fortune, and even my reputation. All with the help of the man I once called my best friend. But the game they were playing had rules they didn't understand because I wrote them. Have you ever faced a betrayal so deep it forced you to fight for everything that mattered? My name is Marcus Stone, I'm 44 years old, and this is the story of how I turned the greatest betrayal of my life into a fight for truth, justice, and my children. Marcus Stone sat in the dim light of his home office. The quiet hum of computer servers filled the silence around him. Multiple monitors cast a blue glow across his face as he stared at footage that would change everything. Surveillance video he had extracted from Rebecca's supposedly encrypted laptop. She sat curled in a velvet armchair in a luxury hotel suite, laughing as Derek Walsh poured champagne into her glass. The soundless footage told him everything he needed to know. The way she tilted her head back. The way her hand lingered on Derek's arm. The way Derek leaned in, whispering something that made her smile like a woman who believed she'd already won. On her wrist was a diamond bracelet Marcus hadn't bought, one that caught the soft hotel lighting as she lifted her glass. Derek's lips moved. Even without audio, Marcus could read the words "a new life." He stared at the screen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. 8 years of marriage reduced to pixels on a screen. Rebecca had always been ambitious, but this was more than ambition. This was calculation. Marcus switched screens. He pulled up a folder he had decrypted the night before. Each file was a nail in the coffin of the life he thought they had built together. Encrypted text messages between Rebecca and Derek scrolled across the monitor, their words cold and deliberate. Derek wrote, "The prenup won't matter if we can prove he's been using company resources for personal surveillance. Your dad's connections will guarantee you full custody." Rebecca's reply was worse than anything Marcus had prepared himself to see. "Ethan and Sophia barely know him anyway. He chose work over family years ago. We'll make sure they understand that." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He exhaled slowly. The weight of betrayal settled in his chest like a stone. But it wasn't just the affair that cut the deepest. It was the lie about his children. He thought about yesterday morning. 8-year-old Ethan racing to the door when Marcus came home late, shouting "Dad's home," like it was Christmas morning. 7-year-old Sophia insisting he read her 3 bedtime stories, not just one, because her voice makes the monsters go away. Daddy. They knew him, they loved him, and Rebecca was planning to poison that. Upstairs, his townhouse was filled with designer furniture Rebecca had chosen, art pieces she had hung, rugs she had insisted on importing from Europe. None of it reflected him, not the man who had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he was old enough to enlist, who had built his cybersecurity business from a cramped apartment with second-hand equipment. Marcus turned back to the screen, his jaw tightening, not with rage but with resolve. Rage was for amateurs, for people who reacted without thinking. He had built his entire career on never reacting, only acting with precision. If Rebecca and Derek wanted to turn this into a game of strategy, they had chosen the wrong opponent. The boy from Detroit who had learned to survive on his own was still in there, still fighting back in 2016, before life became a maze of distrust and whispered accusations. Marcus Stone was a man still adjusting to the idea that good things could actually last. After 8 years in Army intelligence, he had traded covert operations for the equally intense world of cybersecurity consulting. That's when he met Rebecca Hayes, a brilliant mergers and acquisitions lawyer who seemed to command every room she entered. Their connection was electric, almost reckless. Rebecca's intelligence, her drive, and the way she challenged him intellectually pulled him in completely. "You're not like the other guys I date," she told him on their third date, her eyes sparkling over dinner. "You actually listen, you see things." Within 18 months, they were married. 2 years later, the twins arrived, Ethan and Sophia, bright-eyed reminders of why Marcus fought so hard to build a stable life. Ethan was the athlete, always kicking a soccer ball around the yard, asking Marcus to time his sprints. Sophia was the artist, constantly sketching in her notebooks, turning every family moment into a masterpiece with her crayons. Holding them for the first time in the hospital, Marcus made promises he intended to keep. He would be the father he never had. He would be present, protective, and patient. For a while it seemed perfect. Rebecca climbing the corporate ladder, closing multi-million-dollar deals, Marcus securing contracts with Fortune 500 companies, protecting them from cyber threats, both of them building the life they had dreamed about. Every December, they hosted Christmas dinner. Marcus would drag folding chairs from the basement while Rebecca coordinated the menu. Ethan and Sophia would help hang lights, their laughter filling the house. It was chaos, but it was their chaos. But what Rebecca never fully understood was the cost of Marcus's dedication. Corporate cybersecurity consulting wasn't just risk assessments and polished presentations. It was 3M emergency calls when a client's systems were under attack, flying overseas to extract executives whose personal data had been compromised, weeks away from home. Setting up security protocols for companies too proud to believe they were vulnerable. Marcus juggled it all, rarely complaining. His nights often ended in his home office, reviewing threat analyses while Rebecca attended corporate dinners or networking events. He told himself it was fine, she was building her career, and he was protecting theirs. Every time he tucked Ethan and Sophia into bed after returning from a business trip, he promised himself he'd be there more often. Tomorrow would be different. Next month would be better. But the guilt gnawed at him. The missed soccer games, the art projects he only saw after they were finished. Rebecca thrived on the lifestyle his work provided. She loved the dinners at exclusive restaurants, the invitations to charity galas, the quiet acknowledgement among her peers that she was married to someone who mattered. But she never asked what the work cost him. The nights he stayed awake monitoring systems, the weight of knowing that one mistake could destroy a company, cost people their jobs. The first cracks weren't loud arguments or obvious betrayals, they were subtle. Late-night phone calls Rebecca didn't explain, hushed conversations when Marcus entered the room. "You're always working," became her constant complaint, as if the work that paid for her designer clothes and luxury vacations was something he did for fun. By 2022, things had shifted. Rebecca's ambition had become calculating. She spent more time with people Marcus didn't know, powerful executives and lawyers who seemed more interested in her than the deals she was negotiating. Marcus tried to fight for their marriage with quiet consistency. More family dinners, even when he was exhausted from 18-hour days. More time coaching Ethan's soccer team, cheering until his voice was hoarse, reading Sophia bedtime stories in different voices until she giggled herself to sleep. But every gesture felt like throwing stones into a hurricane. By late 2023, even his closest friends noticed. One night while grabbing a beer with Jake, his old army buddy, Marcus finally admitted what he'd been denying. "I can track a cyber threat from anywhere in the world," he said, staring into his glass. "But I can't figure out what's happening in my own home." Jake was quiet for a moment, then he said something that hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "Maybe you're not the target of the hack, brother. You're the system they're trying to break into." What Marcus didn't know then was that Rebecca's ambition was about to cross a line he never imagined she'd step over. The real turning point began on a quiet Sunday morning. Marcus sat alone in his home office, sifting through financial records. Years of military intelligence work had taught him one thing: patterns never lie. Rebecca's sudden aggression in their marriage, her family's growing interference, the smug confidence she carried these days. None of it was random. There was a deeper play, and Marcus was finally ready to uncover it. The smoking gun came buried in sealed court documents. Marcus obtained them through a private investigator who still owed him a favor from his military days. As Marcus scrolled through the scanned files, his jaw tightened. The case was from 15 years ago, an incident involving Rebecca's father, Judge William Hayes. The official record stated that William had dismissed a vehicular manslaughter charge against a young politician's son, citing insufficient evidence, but the sealed files told the real story. The driver had been William's own nephew, James Hayes. His drunk driving had killed the Morrison family on Christmas Eve, a father, mother, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emma. They were coming home from church when James, going 80 in a 35 zone, ran a red light. Emma Morrison would have been 22 now, maybe graduating college, maybe planning her own family. Instead, she was buried in Graceland Cemetery, along with her parents. But William's influence had buried the truth under legal technicalities and sealed testimonies. James got probation and community service. The Morrison family got graves. Marcus sat back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just an ethical lapse, it was career-ending corruption. For 3 weeks, he quietly built a case, piecing together financial records, campaign contributions, and photographs. Margaret Hayes, Rebecca's mother, was no innocent bystander. A paper trail connected her law firm to strategic donations funneled to the district attorney's re-election campaign. As he compiled the evidence, he remained methodical. Not emotional. Every document was cross-referenced, every photo was time-stamped, every financial transfer was verified through independent records. This had to be bulletproof. He also knew something else. The Morrison family deserved better than to be pawns in his chess game with Rebecca. If he was going to use their tragedy, he had to honor their memory. So he reached out to Emma Morrison's surviving grandmother, Helen Morrison, 83, living in a nursing home on the South Side. Marcus found Helen in the common room, working on a crossword puzzle. "Mrs. Morrison," he said gently, sitting across from her. "My name is Marcus Stone. I'd like to talk to you about Emma." Helen looked up, her eyes still sharp despite her age. "Nobody's mentioned Emma's name in 15 years, she said quietly. "What do you want?" Marcus told her the truth, about Rebecca, about the Hayes family, about the evidence he'd found, and about what he planned to do with it. Helen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo. It showed a little girl with pigtails, missing her front teeth, grinning at the camera. "This was Emma on her 7th birthday," Helen said, her voice steady but soft. "She wanted to be a veterinarian, said she was going to save all the stray dogs in Chicago." She handed Marcus the photo. "You use this however you need to. Emma deserves justice. Her parents deserve justice. And if bringing down the people who covered it up helps you save your own children, then Emma would want that too." Marcus took the photo, his throat tight. "I promise you, Mrs. Morrison, this won't be for nothing." By the time he was done compiling everything, the file was thick with undeniable proof. But Marcus wasn't reckless. He didn't want to humiliate Rebecca publicly. Not yet. His goal was control, not chaos. So he waited, letting Rebecca and her lawyer make the first move. A week later, Marcus sat across from Jonathan Pierce, a high-priced family attorney known for his arrogance. Jonathan slid a thick packet across the polished conference table with the kind of smug smile only men like him seemed to perfect. "Sign these," Jonathan said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world. "Rebecca will retain full custody of the twins. She'll also keep the house, the vehicles, and a majority of your consulting business profits. It's in everyone's best interest to make this clean. Otherwise, we'll litigate aggressively, and I can assure you, Marcus, you will lose." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't argue. Instead, he picked up the papers, glanced at them briefly, and then set them down as if they were nothing more than takeout menus. His calm unnerved Jonathan, who shifted slightly in his chair, waiting for anger that never came. Marcus reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out two things, a single envelope, and the small photo Helen Morrison had given him. He placed both neatly on the table. His voice was quiet, measured, every word deliberate. "Before you make any more threats, Mr. Pierce, I want you to look at this photo." Jonathan frowned, glancing down at the picture of Emma Morrison. "What is this?" "Her name was Emma Morrison," Marcus said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "She was 7 years old when your client's uncle killed her along with her parents, on Christmas Eve 15 years ago." Jonathan's face went pale. He stared at the photo, then at Marcus. "The Hayes family covered it up," Marcus continued, "sealed the records, buried the truth, let a drunk driver walk free while a little girl who wanted to save stray dogs was buried in Graceland Cemetery." He pushed the envelope toward Jonathan. "Inside this envelope is everything: court records, financial transfers, photos, enough to destroy William Hayes' legacy and Margaret's law firm. Enough to send them both to prison." Jonathan's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the envelope. "But I'm not a monster," Marcus said. "I don't want to humiliate Rebecca publicly. I just want what's mine. My children, my business, my life." He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "So here's what's going to happen. Rebecca withdraws the divorce petition immediately and signs full custody of Ethan and Sophia over to me. Derek sells his minority share in Stone Cybercasuria back to me at the original valuation. And William Hayes resigns from the bench quietly before the federal investigators get to him first." Jonathan swallowed hard. "And if we refuse?" Marcus's answer was calm and final. "Then Emma Morrison finally gets justice, and the Hayes family learns what it feels like to lose everything." He stood, gathering his things. "Tell Rebecca to think about Emma when she makes her decision. A 7-year-old girl who never got the chance to grow up because her family values power over people." As Marcus walked out, Jonathan sat frozen, staring at the photo of a little girl with pigtails who had been dead for 15 years, but was about to change everything. The first call came just after midnight. Marcus sat in his study, the house quiet except for the hum of his laptop. Rebecca's name flashed across his phone screen. He let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. This time it was Derek Walsh, her accomplice and his former best friend. Marcus ignored that one too. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about Ethan and Sophia sleeping upstairs, about the bedtime story he'd read to Sophia just hours ago, about Ethan's soccer game this weekend, and how his son always looked for him in the stands. The third call came less than 5 minutes later. William Hayes, he answered. What do you want? William demanded, his voice sharp but carrying an undertone of panic. William was used to intimidation, but now it trembled at the edges. Marcus spoke evenly, his tone clipped and deliberate. Justice for the Morrison family. There was silence on the line. William inhaled slowly, then exhaled as if weighing every word. You think you can threaten me with old allegations? They're not allegations, Marcus replied. They're facts. Court records, financial transfers, photographs. You've spent 15 years keeping Emma Morrison and her family buried under lies. But the truth is still out there. Helen Morrison is still alive, and now so is the evidence. William's voice softened, almost pleading. What do you want, Marcus? I want 3 things, he said without hesitation. Rebecca withdraws the divorce petition immediately and signs full custody of Ethan and Sophia over to me. Derek sells his minority share in Stone Cybercaserdia back to me at the original valuation, not the inflated number he tried to extort. And you resign from the bench quietly before the federal investigators get to you first. Fail to do any of this, and I'll make sure every journalist in this city knows what really happened to Emma Morrison. I'll make sure her grandmother gets to tell her story on every news channel that will listen. William didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. You're bluffing. Marcus' answer was calm and final. Emma Morrison was 7 years old when your nephew killed her. She wanted to be a veterinarian. Ask yourself if that sounds like a bluff. He hung up before William could respond, leaving him in silence. By morning, the cracks in the Hayes family's armor were already beginning to show. Derek was the first to panic. By late afternoon, he left a furious voicemail, his voice cracking as he shouted that Marcus was destroying everything. He called again an hour later, this time begging for a meeting. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he picked up Ethan and Sophia from school. They spent the afternoon at the park, feeding ducks and playing on the swings. Normal things, family things. Rebecca's resolve broke next. She showed up at Marcus's office unannounced, her designer blazer wrinkled, her usual composure slipping. You're ruining us, she said, trying to sound angry, but her tone betrayed fear. Do you even care what this will do to Ethan and Sophia? Marcus stared at her for a long moment before answering. I care about them more than anyone in your family ever has. That's why I'm doing this. The Morrison family cared about their daughter too, he added quietly. But your family made sure she's never get justice until now. By evening, the story had begun to grow legs. News outlets hinted at a long-buried judicial cover-up involving a respected judge. Online forums speculated about corruption in the Hayes family. And for the first time in her career, William Hayes canceled his scheduled court sessions. He knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. And he knew the clock was running out. The tension in Jonathan Pierce's office was suffocating. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, his posture relaxed. Rebecca sat stiffly across from him, her hands trembling as she gripped a pen. The thick stack of documents in front of her represented everything she had fought for. Control, custody, wealth, and she was about to sign it all away. Jonathan, usually smug and confident, looked pale and distracted, his gaze fixed on the tabletop as if he wanted to be anywhere but there. Are we doing this or not? Marcus asked calmly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Rebecca glared at him, but the fight in her eyes was gone. Her father had gone silent after Marcus' ultimatum. Derek had refused to even show up. Federal investigators had begun making quiet inquiries into the Hayes family's finances. Every advantage she thought she had was gone. She lowered her eyes and signed her name at the bottom of the custody agreement. Then the business transfer. Finally, the property settlement. Each signature felt like another brick pulled from the empire she had tried to build. When she finished, she pushed the documents across the table. You win, she said bitterly. Marcus didn't move to take them right away. Instead, he leaned forward, his expression unreadable. No, Rebecca, this isn't about winning. This is about truth, about doing right by Emma Morrison, about making sure Ethan and Sophia grow up knowing their father fought for them. He paused, his voice softening slightly. So before we finish, you're going to tell me why you did all of this, the real reason. She stared at him, her lips pressed tightly together. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, sensing where this was headed. Marcus stayed silent, waiting, patient as always. Finally, Rebecca slammed the pen onto the table and snapped. You want the truth? Fine. You were never enough for me, she spat. I married you because you were useful, because you had money, connections, and a reputation people respected. But you were just a security consultant pretending to be something bigger. Her voice grew sharper, more cruel. I outgrew you years ago. Derek understood what I needed. Power, real power, not some foster kid from Detroit playing dress up in expensive suits. Marcus listened without flinching. When she was finished, he gave a slow nod. And yet I just took everything you valued. Rebecca's face flushed red, but she said nothing. Her breathing was shallow, almost shaky. Marcus finally gathered the signed documents and slipped them into his leather folder. But before standing, he pulled out another envelope and set it in front of her. What's this? She asked, her voice wary. Consider it a farewell gift, Marcus said. She opened the envelope and froze. Inside were photographs. Derek Walsh boarding a private jet with a woman half his age, their hands intertwined. Another shot showed Derek withdrawing large sums of cash from a Cayman Islands account registered in both his and Rebecca's names. The final photo captured him lounging on a yacht, champagne in hand, already celebrating his escape. Rebecca's hand trembled as she flipped through the images. This isn't real, she whispered, though her voice cracked with the weight of realization. It's real, Marcus said evenly. Derek drained the accounts 3 days ago. By now, he's probably in the Bahamas. Whatever he promised you, it's gone, just like everything else. Rebecca's composure finally shattered. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. A muffled sob escaped her lips. For a moment, the room was silent, except for her quiet breakdown. Jonathan looked away, uncomfortable, but Marcus didn't move. He simply stood, slid the folder under his arm, and turned toward the door. Without looking back, he said one last thing. You wanted power, Rebecca. Emma Morrison wanted to save stray dogs. Guess which one mattered more? He left her there, the signed agreements on the table, and the weight of her own choices crushing her far more effectively than anything he could have said. The public reckoning came faster than even Marcus expected. Within a week of Rebecca signing the final agreements, William Hayes announced his resignation from the bench. The statement he released to the press cited personal health reasons, but everyone knew the truth. The leaked court records were now part of a growing federal inquiry. The Morrison family's name had begun appearing in news cycles for the first time in 15 years. What had once been a tightly controlled narrative of integrity and judicial service was unraveling in real time. Margaret Hayes' law firm, long considered untouchable, became the next casualty. Federal investigators, armed with Marcus' evidence, quietly froze several of the firm's key accounts under suspicion of money laundering and influence peddling. Major corporate clients began pulling their business overnight. The firm's reputation, built over decades, crumbled in weeks. The Morrison family, now empowered by a team of civil attorneys working pro bono, filed wrongful death lawsuits that tied up nearly every major Hayes asset. Helen Morrison gave a single television interview. She sat in her nursing home room, holding the same photo of Emma she had shown Marcus, and told the world about the little girl who wanted to save stray dogs. Emma would be 22 now, Helen said, her voice steady but weighted with years of grief. She should be graduating college, maybe, planning her own family. Instead, she's been gone for 15 years, and the man who killed her never spent a day in prison. The interview went viral. Justice for Emma trended for 3 days. Suddenly, the Morrison family wasn't just a footnote in a corruption story. They were real people with real faces and real loss, and Marcus hadn't spoken a single word to the media. He didn't need to. The truth, once freed, did its own damage. Rebecca's downfall was quieter but no less final. The divorce withdrawal and custody agreement had left her financially cornered. Derek's theft of their shared accounts ensured she had no safety net. Within months, she was forced to sell her luxury car and the few personal investments she still controlled just to stay afloat. The high society invitations that once defined her life vanished. People who had once sought her advice stopped returning her calls. Eventually, she took a position as a junior associate at a mid-tier law firm. There were no corner offices, no multi-million-dollar mergers to boast about, just contract reviews and billable hours. Derek Walsh was not allowed to fade into quiet obscurity. Marcus had made sure of that through contacts he still had from his military intelligence days. Marcus provided investigators with detailed information about Derek's offshore accounts and the fraudulent business transactions he had orchestrated. Within weeks, Derek's assets were frozen, and his name appeared on an international watch list. He fled from country to country, but every move narrowed his options further. The woman he had fled overseas with left him the moment his money became inaccessible. By the time news outlets caught wind of his downfall, Derek was described as a fugitive, living in budget hotels under assumed names. His reputation in both business and social circles was destroyed. Marcus didn't celebrate any of it, sitting in his home office late at night. He would sometimes think about how easily he could have let his anger dictate every step, how tempting it had been to crush them purely out of revenge. But this was never about spite, it had always been about balance, about making sure Emma Morrison's death finally meant something, about ensuring that those who had destroyed others for their own gain finally faced consequences. The Hayes family had built their power on lies, and now those lies had consumed them. For Marcus, justice wasn't loud, it was quiet, methodical, and final. And for the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. 6 months later, the world felt different for Marcus Stone. On a warm Saturday afternoon, he stood on the back deck, leaning against the wooden railing as he watched Ethan and Sophia chase each other across the yard. Their laughter filled the air. Bright and unburdened, a sound he hadn't heard so freely in months. They didn't understand the full scope of what had happened, the legal battles, the threats, or the quiet war he had waged to protect them. All they knew was that their father had fought for them. And that was enough. Ethan stopped to catch his breath. His cheeks flushed from running. Sophia squealed and darted toward the swing set. Marcus smiled to himself, a quiet pride settling in his chest. This was why he had endured every sleepless night, why he had chosen strategy over rage. He hadn't fought for revenge, he had fought for this simple, peaceful moment. Life had shifted in other ways too. Stone Cybercurity, the firm he had built before the Hayes family tried to strip it from him, was thriving again. News of the Hayes scandal had spread through the corporate world. But more importantly, the Morrison case had given his work new meaning. Several companies had reached out, wanting to hire the man who had brought down corruption and fought for a dead child's memory. Marcus had expanded his operations, hiring a new team of trusted former colleagues. But he's also done something different. He had started a pro bono division, offering cybercurity services to nonprofits and victims' rights organizations. The first client was a foundation Helen Morrison had started in Emmett's memory. They helped families navigate the legal system when their loved ones were killed by drunk drivers. Marcus didn't charge them a penny. Instead, he made sure their systems were bulletproof, their data protected, their communications secure. Emma would love this, Helen told him during one of his visits to the nursing home. She always wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves. But the biggest change was in how Marcus approached his time. Late nights staring at security feeds had been replaced with family dinners, school projects, and evenings teaching Ethan to throw a football while Sophia practiced cartwheels on the grass. Last Christmas, they had started a new tradition. Just the three of them, no extended family drama, no obligatory hosting, just homemade cookies, board games, and stories by the fireplace. Last week, Sophia had asked him to help with a school project about heroes. What makes someone a hero? Dad, she asked, looking up at him with those serious 8-year-old eyes. Marcus thought about it for a moment. About Emma Morrison. About Helen's quiet strength. About the choice between revenge and justice. Heroes are people who do the right thing even when it's hard. He said finally, even when it costs them something. Even when nobody's watching. Sophia nodded solemnly, then brightened. Like you did for us. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I'll always fight for you and your brother, always. Marcus had also learned to let go of anger. He could have pursued the Hayes family further, could have ensured every last piece of their influence was destroyed. But he had already accomplished what mattered most. William was disgraced, Margaret's firm was under federal scrutiny, Derek was a fugitive. And Rebecca was no longer a threat, she was just another person trying to rebuild from the ruins of her own choices. Inside his office, 2 photographs now sat on the shelf. One was of Rebecca, taken years ago when they were still a family. Marcus kept it not out of lingering love or nostalgia, but as a reminder that trust was precious and should never be taken for granted. The other was the photo Helen Morrison had given him, Emma with her pigtails and missing teeth, grinning at the camera like she had all the time in the world. That photo reminded him of something else. That some fights were bigger than personal revenge, that sometimes justice came slowly, but it came. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Marcus stepped off the deck and joined his children in the yard. Ethan tossed him the football, and Sophia cheered when he caught it easily. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like the ground beneath him was solid. His life wasn't perfect, but it was his, earned through patience, sacrifice, and a quiet determination to protect what truly mattered. Some betrayals try to take everything from you. But sometimes they leave you with exactly what you need. Sometimes they show you who you really are when everything else is stripped away. Marcus Stone had learned that lesson the hard way, and he wouldn't trade the wisdom for anything. Emma Morrison never got the chance to save those stray dogs. But in a way, she had saved something else. She had saved the idea that truth still mattered, that justice, however delayed, was still worth fighting for. And in the laughter of two children playing in their father's yard, her memory lived on. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.